I started experimenting with running as kind of the first activity. And what I realized was that until you do something hard labor, well earned, you don't complete your own kind of growth runway, which you could potentially do, because there is the professional side of things, or there's the academic side of things, but this is a place you have to put in the hours. There is no shortcut, right? If you have to run, you have to run the number of kilometers. If you have to swim, or if you have to bike, or if you have to do a mountain trek, you got to do it yourself. So it just actually brings back a reminder of life is going to be hard, and the only way to overcome these hardship is to follow this process of rigor, discipline, willpower, mental toughness.
Nikhil, thank you so much for joining me. And I would be remiss if I didn't start here, because it's a city that was enjoyable for me when I went. And so I saw that you're located in London. So I'm curious, what is your favorite thing about London?
My favorite thing about London is running in Hyde Park. I am, been an avid runner, and I think if you like long distance running, you can actually manage up to doing 30 kilometers, between Hyde Park and some of the other connections around the Hyde Park. And just it has a beautiful vibe about it. And there's so many runners running. And so it's on a sunny day, especially, it's a great place.
Now, sunny day, I got lucky. So I went to London at the end of December and spent the New Year there. And everyone told me I was lucky, and I told them maybe I brought the Tennessee charm or something, because it was actually sunny and it wasn't just dreary and gray and everything. I had a handful of sunny days, and so I felt very lucky about that. And so moving on, we're over halfway throughout the year now, and I'm curious, and I've been contemplating this myself. What are maybe one or two kind of just big aha moments or revelations that you've had this year? And these can be personal or business leadership related. It's whatever direction you want to take that in.
I'll share both personal and leadership. On the personal front, I think the impact the current kind of world dynamics is having on a younger generation is far deeper than I think any one of us realize. With so many kind of wars going on and so many kind of geopolitical dynamics going on across the world, right? I think somehow we, as we are more older or far along our life, we kind of can process them much more objectively and perhaps maturely. I think the impact on perhaps the younger generation, of the ones who are just in college or getting out of college, I think it's, the impact on them is far deeper than many of us realize, right? So it just puts an onus back on us, even at a leadership level, that it's hard to differentiate what's happening in the world versus our day-to-day personal life and business life. And so I think from a leadership point of view, what I would say is translates into maybe a holistic leadership model, where in the past, you're responsible, or you're kind of defined by your leadership within kind of the constraints of your business or your organization. I think that has now changed and shifted, that as a leader, you're actually, you can't control what's happening outside, but as a leader, it's your responsibility to make sure that, you're providing enough guidance, and you're acknowledging some of the geopolitical things happening, because it does affect employees, and it does affect the workforce, and that you're addressing it in a very objective and transparent way.
Yeah, it seems that work life is very much intertwined now, where it seemed maybe during my parents were working, they're retired now, that you were able to separate it, and what was at home and going outside the work area was fine. but now it's all bleeding together. And so I imagine that presents a handful of new dynamics when it comes to leading a company. And so, with that notion in mind, what are maybe some adjustments that you've had to do in terms of your leadership style to kind of match up to this more modern business world where everything is seemingly blended together and all the events going on in the world, like you mentioned?
One of the things I always believed and I learned from my dad was that, kind of continuous learning and continuous skilling is the only constant you can bet on yourself and on the teams you lead, right? So, as a leader, the first thing I always tend to emphasize for all my employees and for myself and peers is that our ability to kind of succeed in what the world is now and where it's heading towards is going to be our ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? And how we create those opportunities, because the biggest source of engaging employees is learning, right? Recently, World Economic Forum had come up with a survey that 90% of employers have found out that employees will stay with the company if they're feeling they're growing in their skill set higher than even their salary, right? I mean, so the number one attribute for retention engagement. And so as a leader, I think the onus on leaders is now to find and create skilling opportunities for employees because they want to learn, but perhaps sometimes they don't know, what are the skills of the future with so much technology disruption, with AI and chat GDP and so on, right? So how do you break it down on bite-sized opportunities where people can process it, learn it, and move along the curve and don't feel like they are left behind, right? So this fear of feeling left behind with all this disruption is pretty high. And as a leader, I think we can really take upon as one of the top objectives to ensure no one is left behind as an employee in kind of learning and skilling and upskilling.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your dad there, and so this gives me an opportunity to actually time travel back to the past before we come back to this type of topic. And so I'm curious, when you were growing up and kind of what you're doing now, will we be surprised at the work that you're doing right now if we knew you as, say, a teenager?
The 2020 hindsight is a wonderful thing, right, Julian? Mm-hmm. Now, if you were to ask a person who knew me when I was growing up, they would say, yeah, perhaps I would end up being in kind of the world of learning and education and a world of purpose. I think in the middle part of my life, perhaps I didn't know that either. But I always had and all credit to my dad, right? My dad was a big learner. Like if you give him 12 books in a day, he would read all 12 books in a day. And at the end of the day, he will, talk with me and my sister about his learnings from those books, right? So we already observed that of how those learning and reading habits really helped him through difficult times. And so, growing up, you sometimes are trying to chase other things, but you ultimately come back to the core of, what you're meant to be. And I would say learning, education, purpose-driven businesses won't be a big surprise if we were to ask people who knew me, back from childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely I definitely believe that because you have a bookshelf behind you with a lot of books, so I can see that that's really instilled and is part of your personal ethos right there. So I saw that you have worked in nearly 20 cities at companies. There's a lot of different companies, but I'll name a few. There's GoDaddy, there's WeWork, there's Intuit, and there's Miramax Films, and many, many, many others. And when someone has that many different types of companies and that many different types of cities, you're coming across so many different types of people and cultures and everything. And so I'm curious, how has that type of experience, influenced your leadership style right now? And also, what have you just simply learned about people?
Travel is, I think, the best university in the world, right? Because when you're growing up, you think the world is a certain way, you think people are a certain way, you feel communities are a certain way, right? You have a very myopic view of a limited kind of geography of where you grow up, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you travel, as you work in different cities, different countries, different industries, different cultures, you started to realize that the depth and breadth of uh, the kind of human potential is so enormous, right? Because you certainly, the light bulb goes on to say, hey, the same thing is being done differently in a particular country, or the same thing is being done very innovatively in different country, right? So it really grounds you in a way, and makes you very kind of humble in a way, because you feel like you grew up certain places and you learn certain things, and that's the world, and you go somewhere else and you say 10 people are finding a better way to do it, or a faster way to do it, and so you realize there's always this constant hunger to learn, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it kind of helped me get fast track on a growth mindset, because anytime you're in a new country, a new city, the degree of uncertainty is higher, right? You got to learn a new culture, new environment, new way of doing things. Uh, on the other hand, you also realize that the basic values of humanity remain the same, right? People still want to have a good laugh. People love music. People want to, interact and kind of learn about your culture, and vice versa. People want to explore, things which they cannot travel to, but they can explore through interactions with you. And so, to me, that shaped myself as what I call a global nomad. And so I feel like I can now go to any place and have that uh, cultural grounding and sensitivity and awareness of learning first, understanding
Mm-hmm.
first, and then kind of coming up with more kind of prescriptions or directions, right? So I think that's the biggest learning I've got, is like it just got me to the growth mindset of embrace the change, but ask before you prescribe, learn before you kind of have conclusions,
Mm-hmm.
and that can only happen through kind of these cross cultural interactions across the world.
Mm-hmm. So now I have to give you the impossible question that you probably have been asked 100 times already. What are maybe 2 or 3 of your favorite spots that you travel to?
India is always going to be in my heart, because I've born and brought up there. So it's always part of me. I would say Greece, because of course Greece has this natural beauty and all the blue oceans, but I think the culture there is quite rich. The history is quite deep. And the philosophy of the country is amazing, right? About teaching about life and humanity, and so I've really fallen in love with Greece as kind of almost my second home, and I love the culture, environment, and just the way people operate, and based on relationships, based on deep philosophies, and also good kind of work-life balance. And then the U.S. always, I believe, from an innovation point of view, from creating product innovation, creating kind of being the first leader of many good innovations which come out of the world, and the way it kind of teaches and educates people to be successful entrepreneurs. I think there's the level of innovation, the level of speed, velocity of kind of both successes and failure is so high that it's a great teacher, to the ecosystem around the world.
Mm-hmm. And I think I know the answer to this, because I'm noticing something here. But I'm curious. So your current position now is the CEO at Epignosis, and also can be known as TalentLMS, to my understanding. And what attracted you to the position?
I believe in a saying, right? Like Rumi has a very famous saying, what you seek is seeking you. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's for me, at this stage of my career, I wanted to A, work in a very meaningful and purpose driven industry, which obviously skilling and learning is. Two, which has kind of a worldwide reach. So Epignosis, TalentLMS, we are in 158 countries. Focused on small and medium-sized businesses, which has been kind of very close to my heart because I've worked very closely with SMBs around the world, and has a great kind of cultural DNA to it. And when I say cultural DNA, their employees, their customers, their investors, shareholders. And so when I added up all these attributes through my learning process and through my interactions, I just felt like this is going to be a good home because it kind of combines what I call a missionary and a mercenary approach, because missionary is all purpose, mercenary is about how do you build a scalable, successful, profitable business. And I think I thrive on when there's both a missionary and a mercenary part, and with all these attributes, I was kind of blown away by the opportunity, what lies ahead, and what we can do for the world in the space of learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the world is becoming more and more digital, and I think already I saw just from some gathering up some things here. I think I saw that you guys had 12,000 customers, 22 million users, and then across the 158 countries that you mentioned. And with the world becoming more digital now, and this is there's an opportunity to really revolutionize the e-learning landscape. And so I'm curious, kind of what's your big vision for that, and where do you see this going?
Our vision is to, be the unlocking global potential, basically, right? If you think about, we are powering technology to unlock global potential, and what global potential is through skilling, upskilling, reskilling. And at every employee level, at every individual level, if you ask anybody, what is the number one aspiration they have, they want to grow, and they want to grow through acquiring new skills or enhancing existing skills, or sometimes unlearning skills which no longer are relevant in the current world, right? And I think we are sitting at the center of that wonderful opportunity to make a meaningful difference to all the 22 million users we have, and another 100 million users who are out there who are still not engaged with us, to really transform their lives. If you think about our customer audience, right, the small, medium-sized businesses, SMBs are time constrained and money constrained, right? Because of the nature of SMB, they have only a limited bandwidth of what they can do, and because of the nature of SMB, the access to capital and the focus on conserving cash is very important to them, right? And what we do is we provide a easy to use solution which basically solves the time constraint problem, because our solution is very much very low touch, easy to onboard, easy to kind of start and using day one within a matter of hours, and then also it's very affordable, so it solves the money constraint problem for SMBs, right? So we want to really transform the lives of small business through unlocking this potential of their employees through skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. And if you look at the global economy, right, majority of global economies are dependent on SMBs, and if SMBs grow, the GDP grows, and GDP grows, the whole kind of the world economy around the world, around different countries starts kind of growing.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you mentioned time and money. What are maybe some other, I would say, maybe deficiencies or misnomers when it comes to learning and development and companies integrating this within their culture in a meaningful way and an actually effective way?
So one of them is, how easy it is to kind of use the product, because it's one thing that I want to learn. The other thing is, how do I learn, right? If I take a particular course or I learn a particular piece of content, how simple, easy, and memorable can I make from an experience point of view, right? And so our product, we have customers who have actually never ever spoken to us. They discovered our product, they signed on for the product, they're using the product, their employees are using the product, and we get a very solid NPS from them, right? Which speaks to the product itself, that a successful product never should actually require any human touch, right? Because somebody adopts it, uses it, kind of recommends to other, and gave us a very high kind of rating, right? And so that's one thing I would say about TalentLMS. The other one is also the depth and breadth of content, right? So we today have a talent library which has over 1,000 courses for people to select, when they subscribe to our TalentLMS product, right? And these courses are both business courses and also personal development, right? Things like mindfulness, mental wellness, or business things about AI, about sales enablement. How do we make a career in customer service? And so I think having that balance of personal and professional content is important, because as every employee, they want to do both, right? They want to be a better employee with more skills, and also a better human being, which gives them more happiness and joy, the mind, body, spirit analogy. And so I think those two would be kind of the other attributes I would add to what I talked previously about time and kind of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as the company grows, how do you recommend leaders to not sacrifice culture and quality as they start to grow?
The famous saying of culture eats strategy any day. I think at the heart of business, if you look at what is a business, right? Business is made up of people, mm-hmm. and people thrive in a good culture. The more happier they are, the more productive they would be, and the more engaged and fired up they would be. The more unhappy they are, the more they will feel like a burden to do the job or show up at work, right? So I think creating this culture of starting with the culture of purpose, starting with the culture of engaging employees through a very kind of well-defined mission and vision. The good old North Star principle, right? That great employees create great products for the customers, which ultimately creates a great shareholder value, right? So starting with employees and creating this culture of kind of positivity, accountability, high engagement, high growth velocity, and kind of bringing that all together in a way where we all are collectively, bigger than the sum of each other, right? So 1 + 1 has to be greater than 2. And I think that's where the leadership comes in. That's where the company vision, mission comes in, because none of us wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to make more money with my product today, right? That's an output. What we wake up is to say, okay, how many people am I going to skill today, right? How many people's life can I change through my, learning platform? And that's the difference between, I would say, a culture of a company versus just having a transactional business.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of culture right now, probably one of the biggest things that every leader is probably debating and hearing about all the time is this thing of remote, hybrid, or full on-site. How are you approaching that and handling it? And also, when you talk to other different CEOs and leaders, are you hearing that this is a thing that all of them are being affected by and having to debate and kind of juggle and wrestle with?
Absolutely. I think it's a global issue across small, medium, large enterprises, right? Because kind of pre and post COVID, a lot of things changed, and hence this debate is also rightfully relevant. My view is, again, it's not one size fits all. It depends on the business you are in, the locations you're in, the life cycle you're in, and what are you trying to create, right? Now, certain businesses, you need to have people come together because they need to collaborate, they need to innovate, they need to produce things which can only be done through more of human interactions. And some businesses, it's very automated, right? It's more like things are pretty much, I would say, on a steady state basis, and all that needs to be done is more of a better velocity or better speed, right? So to each its own. I believe a hybrid workforce is perhaps where the model of the future will be, because it gives you a balance of both flexibility, but also the opportunity to learn from your peers, and also work with your peers and develop relationships with your peers, right? Because at the heart of it, we are all humans, and we thrive on building relationships. We succeed on building relationships. We create innovation through relationships, and having that kind of in-person time, there is no substitute for that, right? The frequency of that, again, is company by company, industry by industry, and otherwise, I think the risk of not being together for a long time can actually diminish your growth as an individual as well, because I'm going to meet you, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to exchange some ideas, let's experiment a few things. That's the human interaction. And then, hey, now we've succeeded in the experiment, let's scale it up. Maybe that doesn't need a lot of interaction. We can do it, more remotely. So all three models are out there. My take is, I think the world will more get closer to a hybrid model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was also thinking just, and I'm not sure if this is true, but it just seems like for those who are seeking mentoring, who are seeking to really develop their skills and maybe grow from maybe into a possible C-suite position or something like that, that you need that in-person element to where the coaching and the development can happen more. I'm not sure if, and I would like to hear your thoughts, if that element of coaching and mentoring is as effective when it's just full remote as opposed to being in person. What do you think about that?
Personally, for me, I would never substitute in person through remote, right? Because I feel, for me, kind of getting the mentoring, getting the insights, ability to have a very fluid dialogue in person, getting the full attention, because in an attention deficit world, being in person is a lot more focused than perhaps sometimes being online. So I if I look back on what have been my successful opportunities to learn from people, by far in person have been much more impactful and powerful than being kind of online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the next thing here, we're kind of going to pivot topics a little bit. And as I was researching you, I saw that you are quite the fitness enthusiast who who does a lot of different fitness activities. So I'm curious, where did this passion and likening for pretty tough fitness events, where was it birthed from and come from?
In school, I was quite active, and then I think life took over, and then I think maybe a decade and a half ago or something, in my travels as I was moving cities, I realized one of the cities I kind of started getting unhealthy, picked up some weight. My health stats were not looking good. The energy levels were down, and I'm like, I started kind of thinking about, I'm like 10 years older than I should be. at least based on my health stats. And that was like a aha moment. And I started experimenting with running as kind of the first activity. And what I realized was that until you do something hard labor, well earned, you don't complete your own kind of growth runway, which you could potentially do, because there is the professional side of things, or there's the academic side of things, but this is a place you have to put in the hours. There is no shortcut, right? If you have to run, you have to run the number of kilometers. If you have to swim, or if you have to bike, or if you have to do a mountain trek, you got to do it yourself. So it just actually brings back a reminder of, like, life is going to be hard, and the only way to overcome these hardships is to follow this process of rigor, discipline, willpower, mental toughness. And to me, it started as a physical activity, but it really became more of a kind of a holistic, mental, physical, psychological, and to some extent even a meditative activity. And so and this growth mindset from early days, observing my parents, was also that the minute I would start feeling comfortable, like I started doing, running half marathons, full marathons, and I'm like, I'm getting comfortable. How do I keep pushing myself, right? So that's when I started, experimenting with triathlons and Ironman. And the guiding principle here was that never get comfortable in kind of in your achievements or your milestones, because the world changes so fast, right? And so for me, these activities, of course, in addition to the physical benefits, but I think it's more outside of that, it kind of keeps the guiding principle of, willpower, discipline, pushing yourself, and really reminding yourself that nothing happens unless you put in the hours here.
Mm-hmm. I could not agree further. I am a recent individual who started to pick up endurance maybe a few years ago. I was normally just weightlifting, boxing, more explosive type of things. And the difference is, to me, when, like you said, when you're running, you really find out about yourself, because you can't really skip that process. And a lot of times it's painful and can sometimes be boring. And but you really learn about yourself. And so and you get a lot of ideas when you're just out there for a couple of hours. So, and kind of like you, once you do like a half marathon, did a marathon, you're like, okay, what's next? So now I'm doing an ultra marathon. Can't do the triathlon yet, because my swimming is really not there. So I have a long ways to go before that. And so I'm curious now. I saw maybe a few years ago, you mentioned something about building teams and marathon training, and how it's not that different. And so I would love to expound on that notion a little more.
It's great to hear about your running, and I can promise you you'll be doing triathlon soon. I did not know swimming till maybe 7-8 years, until I signed up for an Ironman not knowing how to swim, because I signed on to say that this will force me to learn swimming, right? I was the guy who would go into the pool and just hang out and have fun, right? Nothing more. And then you learn swimming in the pool, and then, that's not good enough, because now you have to swim in a lake or an ocean, because all these triathlons happen there, right? So it was a journey in itself, but I'm just sharing with you because you'll get there very fast, a lot faster than you realize. But coming back to your question on marathons and running, right? So running, it's a wonderful sport, because you got to run, right? There's nobody who can run for you. So it is creating that kind of rigor, discipline, willpower of doing things on your own. Because when you're running, and it's only your legs and your willpower and your body. But it also combines group training, that you get in, you hey, 5-6 of you get together. I'm going to, train on a Saturday morning, and let's go for a long run and, do 10, 15, 20K. And it's building that team spirit and building, how you can motivate others. So that way, when you're in a group, you're motivating others, the people who are far along the skill set can, bring others along. they cannot do the work for them, right? So from a leadership point of view, you can't do the work, but you can show them the way. You can share your story. You can, share your lessons. And to many, that's good enough, right? And so that's the beauty of running. It combines both your individual growth and development, because you got to do it on your own at the end of the day. But it brings in the leadership side of things, that if you do it in a group, that you have ability to develop your leadership, attributes. So for me, later on, I started pacing. So any events, I would become a pacer for first-time runners, because that was also a way for me to test how can I become a better leader. Because you come in an event, you're pacing a certain time, right? So let's say people are doing a half marathon and you're pacing 2 hours. Now all these 10 people join your kind of your cohort. It's your responsibility. You're pacing them through. You're making sure what are the right water spots. When do we do speed up? When do you have to slow down? But what you can't do is run for them. And at sometimes you have to take difficult calls to, one other person is not going to make it. And so you give them the encouragement, but you keep moving along, right? So those facets are just amazing, to kind of draw to leadership, where you can develop yourself so much and find yourself so much, to your earlier point.
Yeah, that's such a great point. That's such a great point. And I think it's the pacing as well. And I think that's such a good life metaphor, because a lot of times I think, and I know I've been guilty of this, that you really want to rush success, or you want to rush getting there wherever there is for you. And I heard it somewhere, and it stuck with me, that it's almost like baking a cake as well, that if it calls for a recipe at a certain temperature, but you try to turn it up more so it can get there quicker, you're going to mess the whole process up. And I learned this with running. When I first started running, I was running like I was sprinting, like I was doing sprints. And so I would start off blazing, and then I would just completely crash. So I had to learn how to run for endurance. And it's like, because I have very long legs. And so I had to learn how to shorten my stride and all these little basic elementary things. But once I did that, the world opened up for me. And I kind of see, it sounds like leadership is kind of like that as well. There's these very small little nuances that you learn, and it really makes a big difference. And so to bring this into a big picture, what would you say are some common cultural building mistakes that leaders may unfortunately make?
I think first is, I think, never underestimate the power of a vision and a mission, right? Because it has to be big, bold, aspirational, motivational, something bigger than ourselves as humans. And sometimes it can be construed as, this is just a very academic exercise. But no, it's not, right? You got to inspire people through a big, bold mission and vision, and then you have to make sure they're carriers of that mission vision across the organization, right? Because it's as good as a statement on a PowerPoint or on a flow chart if it's not being lived by, right? So making sure that every day, every employee which is coming to work is reminded and excited and motivated by what are we doing to the world? Why do we exist as a company, right? I think, like, as a leader, I would say 3 big things, right? Like, one is make sure everybody knows why do we exist in the world, and how does it matter? Second is, how do we all work together? And that's really the culture and the first principles and the values, right? And how are we going to, make the money, which is unit economics, right? Because if in your business, then you have, your metrics to achieve, right? And kind of bringing all these 3 aspects together, I think is kind of on one level very simplistic, but the other level very complex. And a lot of organizations sometimes kind of over-index on one versus the other. It's always there's always a balance where all 3 needs to kind of work in tandem for a successful, organization. One other thing I'll add is also the process is always more important than the output. You're from sports background, and you listen to the best of the best, and they will all talk about, it's the daily process. It's the daily process. The end result happens to be an output. And the same thing applies in the business, that you have a North Star, but what matters is what process are you following every day, and not getting fixated on this North Star, like number or some metric every day, right? That just happens to be the output. But what are you doing in the input? And input is all around the process. And if you're putting in the time, you're putting in the effort, and you're making sure your process is improving, the output will anyway be wonderful, right? So process is a lot more important. It's the daily 1% improvement principle, right? How are you improving every day on the process, and which is ultimately leading to like 300 times more improvement over the year.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things here I also saw is that some of the philanthropic work that you did. And so what led you to get involved with Caregiver Share?
So, from my personal experiences, I had, my parents go through, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. And one of the things I learned early on was that while there was a lot of support, I would say, at a medical level, but at a family level, right? If you're a caregiver as a family member, you kind of get lost because you're trying to do your best. But in these cases, it's not like it's a medical illness which can be reversed, right? And so, as a family caregiver, I realized that building a community of kind of caregivers who can share their experiences, because the best you can do is share your experiences, because it can help somebody going through a similar journey at some point of time in a different country. And the more I spoke to people when I was sharing my journey, I realized so many people are going through this. As we age, our parents get older, and just the kind of the things get, kind of these things catch up. And so it's not like it's not going to happen. More likely it happens majority of the time. And so how can we create this community where people are just sharing, hey, these things worked for me, to keep myself also, balanced. Because a lot of time caregiving is a very taxing journey, and sometimes you can lose yourself in it. And so my mission is just to, bring these various inspirational, motivational stories of various caregivers. So, and it keeps inspiring other caregivers to say, there's more purpose to it. It's difficult, but here's how others have done it, and maybe you can learn from them as well.
Yeah, it's a very emotionally. It can be very emotionally taxing, because I went through it with my father. So it can be a very taxing process, and so it's good that you're doing that. So I saw that it was a tweet a long time ago that you did. It was Shane Watson, and I'm learning more about cricket players because I interviewed a coach in that aspect, and he wrote the book Winning the Inner Battle, and you tweeted that you are never moving the needle on success if you've never won the inner battle. So I'm curious, how do you manage and win your inner battle on a daily basis?
Yeah, Shane's a wonderful friend and a brilliant, cricketer. And the other one which I had the pleasure of working with was the former India captain MS Dhoni. If you ever kind of search him up, he's one of the biggest the sport has ever produced. And with Shane and through some of the other, I've had the opportunity to talk to a few sports people, and also a few spiritual philosophers and so on, just to kind of keep the learning about your own self, right? And the reality is, all of us carry our inner battles. I think the first thing is to accept it, because I think when we are younger, we kind of put them under the cover. We want to deal with it because there's just so much happening out there, right? And so I think first thing is acknowledging and acceptance, which also is looking back at your own journey, all the way from childhood to adulthood, to experiences you've had with your parents, with your friends, with other relationships, and kind of recognizing the up and the down moments. Like if you draw a journey line of what were the inflection points, either which took you high or brought you low, it will give you a pattern of your inner battles and what kind of maybe scars one would have gotten from certain type of experiences, right? Once you have an understanding of that, then it's about spending time by yourself dealing with them, because nobody will be able to solve it for you. And that's where things like meditation are very, very helpful, because you're kind of connecting with your thoughts. Things like even yoga is wonderful, because it's all about breathing. And if you think about what breathing does, is it brings you back in the present, because the only thing which is here is your breathing, and which is keeping you alive, right? And brings you back the focus. And so, I do a lot of reflections of on a daily basis, weekly basis. I look at patterns of my own behavior, which sometimes the good ones and sometimes not the good ones, and be very objective in analyzing yourself as a third party. Like if I was talking to my own self as somebody else, and I'm observing and giving it the same advice, there's a lot you can uncover from that, right? And so I think it's learning to just address and take yourself head on, and looking at both your kind of the past patterns and how they're influencing your kind of current behavior, and what do you want to change and what do you don't want to change.
Mm-hmm. And the last question that I have for you here is, someone walks up to you in a coffee shop and they ask you, what are 3 things that I can do today to become a better leader? What would you tell them?
The first and the most important thing is you got to be a very people-centric leader, which means leadership is about both being bold and being kind. And kindness doesn't mean weakness, and bold doesn't mean being overly ambitious, right? And so I think always overestimate the power of how much you can motivate employees, because you have a story and employees have a story, and you as a leader can bring all these stories together and really, kind of bring them to a level you can far imagine, right? So making sure you're starting with people first. Second is I talk about, fall in love with your customer's problem, not your own solution, which essentially when you're in a business, you have identified a problem you want to solve. But a lot of time you get fixated on the product you have created to solve it, right? Or the service you have created to solve it. And that product or service may be great, or it may fail, but the problem you've identified is the right problem, right? So having that obsession, fixation on problem solving for the customer is very important, because it doesn't happen as much as you think it would. We are obsessed by our solution, and we feel like that's the right solution, right? And the last one is, I think, the job of a leader is to kind of create a big, bold strategy, build shared consciousness around the organization, but remove barriers. Like we tend to sometimes create greatness in people. I believe all of us have been born with some sort of a great skill set or unique, kind of skill we all have. And we don't need to create greatness among people. What we need to do is create the right process, create the right opportunity, remove the roadblocks for people to do the best work of their lives, right? And so that's where I feel like the leaders come in, right? Around unlocking the potential through breaking down barriers and really letting people do what they're good at. And many people are good at a lot of things, but they get stuck in the process or sometimes the environment.
And that is a fantastic way to wrap a nice bow on this conversation. Nikhil, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation, especially the aspects of the running and everything. And if I ever find myself to London, I'm going to hit you up, and we will definitely, hopefully, if you will grace me with your presence, go for a run in the park. And
it'll be great to do that, and we certainly hope maybe you'll be signing up for the London Marathon in not too far distant future.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I need to check the dates on that. That's not a bad idea. Where can listeners, viewers just learn more about you and your company and everything that's going on there?
So our talentlms.com is our website, and epignosishq.com is our kind of company level website. So please go to these websites, and you get a lot of information on that. On a personal basis, I'm active on LinkedIn, and I'm kind of semi-active on Instagram. I tend to post more, life and leadership aspects there. And so Nikhil Arora.official is my Instagram handle, and LinkedIn, you can find it up at Nikhil Arora, and you type Epignosis, you'll find me. We do check out our products. We allow you to use our product for free. And so even if you're an individual learner, you can just come on talentlms.com and try something and see how it works for you. I can promise you'll come out as a better, more skilled person.
And that's awesome to hear. And I will have all that in the show notes in case somebody is running, biking, or any other activity, or just driving right now. So until next time, listeners out there, stay awesome, be limitless, and as always, go be the CEO of your health and your life.